most difficult things for me were becoming strategic. I thought I was the smartest in the room, and I very quickly learned that was not the case. But I think the more strategic and the more being able to work with the executives from other departments and making sure I saw how they saw the business, because my biggest transition was
typically the CFO has the shortest tenure. Is it because they're being asked to do so much?
That role is challenging enough to be at the end of your career. Finance and accounting people, we love the details. But I think with all these changes, there's expectations that a lot of CFOs or finance leaders can't meet yet.
What does great FP&A look like?
One thing is impartial and data-driven.
What's the number one technical skill FP&A professionals should master?
You need to understand financial statements.
What's the number one soft skill?
Being able to connect with people.
Many people on the show want to be CFO. What advice would you offer them? Where should they get started?
Being bold and being willing to...
This week's title sponsor of FP&A Tomorrow is KPI. And now a message from our sponsor.
Planning in Excel works until it doesn't. When manual error-prone back-and-forth planning in spreadsheets prevents you from scaling across products, customers, or complex scenarios, consider Capion. Recognized by Gartner for financial planning and trusted by industries such as manufacturing, CPG, and not-for-profit, Capion offers the flexibility and control to scale, automate, and plan your way. Learn more at Capion.com. That's Capion with a K, Kepion.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Tomorrow, where we delve into the world of financial planning and analysis, examining its current state and future prospects. I'm your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and I will be guiding you through the evolving landscape of FP&A. Each week, we are joined by thought leaders, industry experts, and practitioners who share their insights and experiences, helping us navigate today's complexities and tomorrow's uncertainties. I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Steve Rosvold. Steve, welcome to the show.
It's great to be on with you, Paul. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, excited to have you. This will be a fun time. So a little bit about Steve. Steve comes to us from the state of Washington. He's in the Vancouver area. He is the founder and principal of CFO University, providing content for people, training, courses, information for those who want to be a CFO, helping them get there. During his career, he was the CFO of ConAgra Brands. He earned his CPA. He did his undergrad in history, might ask him about that, and did an MBA in finance. So we're thrilled to have him. So, first question I want to ask is, how did you go from being a CFO of ConAgra to starting your own business? How did that happen?
Well, yeah, I'd spent 22 years in the corporate world, a bunch with Cargill and then with ConAgra for 4 years as the CFO of their malting company. And ConAgra and the other owner of this joint venture decided they wanted us to move from Vancouver to Omaha. So we moved the headquarters office from Vancouver. And we had kids in high school at the time. And Pat and I started talking about it and saying, this might be a great opportunity to get out of the helter-skelter of the multinational and try something on my own. So my entrepreneurial bent was I was pretty excited about that. This gave us the opportunity. It gave me the opportunity to kind of test that. And so when we moved the office, I didn't move and I stayed here in Vancouver. And the rest is history. Let me put it that way.
All right, great. And we'll jump more into that, both CFO University and some of the consulting you've done. But I want to go back to your days in corporate. You worked in corporate, worked your way up, and eventually becoming a CFO. I'm curious, what was the hardest part of making that adjustment from, being a team member to being over the entire function to being that CFO?
Yeah, I'd spent my career in accounting and finance with these multinational companies, which can be their own career paths, right?
Sure.
And so when I became the CFO at ConAgra Malt, I think that the most difficult things for me were becoming strategic. So all of a sudden, the tactical pieces where I'd been really successful with certain areas, whether it was, the P&L division in Cargill's grain department, or whether it was in our energy department where I kind of ran some of the logistics, I didn't have that strategic bent. So that was a big shift where all of a sudden you have to really not get caught in the weeds. So I had to pull myself up from the weeds. I think another area was working with execs from really directly with sales and marketing, with operations, with some of the logistics people, and making sure that we worked together with them. In the past, I could do a lot of things on my own and come up with ideas, and it really didn't impact them as much. Now, the decisions I was making was going to impact them. And I think the third area, when I never had treasury operations. So at CFO University, we consider finance, accounting, treasury, and leadership as the 4 pillars of the CFO. And at my Cargill days, treasury was centralized. And so I never had that cash management fundraising experience I got thrown into as a CFO at the ConAgra joint venture. And so I think for me, that was very specific, a technical area I didn't have skills in. But I think the more strategic and the more being able to work with the executives from other departments and making sure I saw how they saw the business. Because that was my biggest transition was I thought I was the smartest in the room. And I very quickly learned that was not the case. And I better be able to work with these people and learn what they're all about. And so those were kind of the 3 big shifts I made when I became a CFO.
Yeah, and I want to dig into one of those. And that's the first one you mentioned of that becoming more strategic and also being able to see big picture versus being in the details in the weeds. Because I think that's a common challenge FP&A professionals have in general. I know it was a real challenge for me I had to work on is, okay, they don't need all the details. My boss doesn't care. He doesn't want them. He wants the strategic and the big picture. How did you make that adjustment?
Well, I think one of the things that helps a lot as a CFO is you have a team to help you do that. So you still need somebody in the weeds, somebody to do all the hard, that heavy lifting. And so but being able to manage them rather than wanting to do it. So, and especially finance and accounting, we're used to delivering results. We're used to doing the work. We don't mind hard work. And so, if you kind of enjoy that part of your role, all of a sudden, all that detail you're getting in where you're creating those insights from all that, somebody else is going to start doing that for you. Or you're not going to be in that CFO job very long. So I think for my background, it was being able to accept others are going to do great work. And I just need to be able to lead them and nurture their great work and use it more strategically than tactically. And so that was, I think, kind of the biggest framework or mindset change for me was others are going to do the work. So it's not so much that you don't do the work or the group doesn't do the work, just that you're not doing the work, right? As much gratification as that used to come when I'd get that big project done, you kind of have to step back from that.
Makes total sense as a CFO. What if you're in a role where you're still pretty hands-on, but you're managing, or we're not managing, but you're supporting high-level people who want the big picture? Any advice of how you make that transition or focus on making things high level, right? Because you have to get into the weeds, but the people you may be supporting don't want you in the weeds. They want that big picture. And I know for me, it was difficult to make that adjustment or that switch. It took a lot of practice.
That is such a great question. And I still, to this day, people look at a PowerPoint presentation of mine, they say, how come there's so much on there? So I have to consciously think, remove, because my background, give them all that work I did because it's great detail.
Yeah.
And so you really have to step back from that and say, what's really important? And one of the best ways you can do that is to find some mentors to test with. And so what I would do is I had my CEO at ConAgra was great at this, but even other people that you're not necessarily presenting to, go over your presentations with them. Here's my message, and you'll get that great feedback. So that's one way to get real life feedback on here's what I was going to say, and let somebody kind of say, whoa, that is way over the top. I just need the executive summary, and that really helps, will help you.
Yeah, I think that's great to get feedback from others. I've told this story many times on different podcast episodes. I had a boss that was extremely detailed. So we got along great because I'm very detailed. He wanted everything. Then all of a sudden they let him go through a reorg. And I had a new boss that wanted everything high level. And she didn't like me. And it was, pretty apparent. It was like, he does good work. Just give him time. There were people, telling her that when she complained. And one guy would literally on meetings, he would DM me on the side, like, bring it up. You're getting too detailed. And we had an agreement. He would always tell me. And that was something that forced me to start thinking more big picture because I would want to get so much into the weeds. So it was definitely a hard transition for me.
Yeah, and I think it's something you have to consciously think about. And especially, again, finance and accounting people, we love the details. That's partly, a lot of us have the roots where the deep analysis is kind of what we, bringing something new by looking at things very carefully is kind of in our DNA. And so there's all this tension to say, well, now I want you to know all the work I did. And I think that's what you got to steer away from. Don't worry. That's a sunk cost. Figure out what we need to know to do their jobs, and that's when you can hit gold nuggets for sure.
Agree. Next question, I'm going to ask you two here. First, how have you seen the role of the CFO change over the last decade? Or even from when you were a CFO to now, what are maybe some of the biggest changes you've seen?
I kind of think there's a few of them. One of them, the CFO used to be the steward of the balance sheet and the cost control guru, right? So if you look at it, and there's still that's still the case, certainly from the balance sheet, stewarding the balance sheet, cost control is still important. But where the CFOs are getting much more involved is above the gross margin line. And so you see them get involved in procurement more, in sales more. I mean, you and I did a talk on pricing in the finance team. And 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been a discussion. So being able to have input in above the gross margin line, I think is a huge opportunity and a huge change, a shift in the CFO role. So that's exciting. It's whether it's selling, figuring out what information you can sell, figuring out how to price better, looking at product mix more carefully and having an influence on that. I think those are really important. And then I think the other two big changes are human capital has become much more important. So, the idea of how do we measure human capital? It's we don't have it on the balance sheet, we expense it. How do we really know the value is becoming a really interesting area for CFOs and finance people to get involved in. So there's some really, really bright people working on that. And then the other area is just technology. I mean, there are so many tools. Now, this with all the work that you do on evaluating tools for FP&A, that is all over the CFO suite, not just in FP&A, but in, billing systems and accounting systems. And so I think those three areas have supercharged the CFO role, made it really important, but also made it much more difficult. So I think, you find a good CFO that can adopt all that and get to those areas, super valuable.
When you talked about it makes it much more challenging, but much more valuable. That led me to a question. I saw something recently that showed of your typical C-level employees, like your CRO, CPO, whatever you want to call them, the different ones, COO, right? All those different ones. Typically, the CFO has the shortest tenure. And you've probably seen that before. Why is that? Is it because they're being asked to do so much? Do you think it's burnout or just naturally they're ready for the next challenge? Or why do you think that is?
It's a great question. I know that from my background, that role is challenging enough to be a career, the end of your career. I mean, but I do think that with all these things, there is a big burnout factor. You mentioned that. I don't think the CFO is being the scapegoat, but I think with all these changes, there's expectations that a lot of CFOs or finance leaders can't meet yet. Of those three areas that we described, whether it's having a focus, having more impact on the strategic part of the business, the above the gross margin line from a P&L standpoint, understanding how human dynamics work. So being able to keep staff, train staff, and build a good staff, that necessarily wasn't in the CFO's realm 15 and 20 years ago. Now it's demanded. You have to be able to manage people well to keep them, attract them, and grow them. And so I think part of it is, and I don't want to call it a competency issue, but there's an experience issue that people are still trying to go through to be able to achieve those capabilities. And so the expectations versus the performance, there might be a disconnect there because the expectations are that those three areas I mentioned earlier are getting done. And I'm not sure all CFOs are ready to jump on board with that yet,
So if I'm hearing this, I think it's the expectations have continued to increase, no doubt. And with that, there may be a little bit bigger gap of people being able to meet all those and adjust, especially first-time CFOs. Plus, there's sometimes a burnout factor as well to that role that probably is contributing to that shorter tenure.
I could have not said that better myself. That was a great summary, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try to summarize it. But now let's talk FP&A. So we talked a little bit of CFO. How have you seen FP&A change over the last, 10, 20 years during your career from when you were a CFO to kind of how you think about it today?
Well, in my day, it was, the accounting function kind of ruled, and a lot of the reporting and analysis came out of what would be the controller function. And what's happened is FP&A has been able to carve out a place that says, hey, there is more to our role. In fact, we want a separate role that doesn't have to do with all the recording, all the governance and the internal controls that kind of get kind of wrapped around that controller function or accounting function. And so I think there was a recognition that this forward-looking, and I don't use that as a negative against accounting, because I'll tell you, without a great, solid accounting team, FP&A can't go very far.
100%
you don't have
agree.
the good data. So I think that the foundation is still that accounting piece. But FP&A recognizes, hey, and I think business leaders recognize that having this forward-focused, kind of insights-driven, analysis-driven is kind of a separate group, potentially a separate group from that recording and reporting function, internal control function. And so that's split. And there's still a lot of small companies that kind of have one area where the controller does a lot of the FP&A function. But as the companies get bigger, they recognize that we need this separate group focused on just the future. And so FP&A is a great fit for that. And FP&A, it is the shining bright spot in the CFO suite right now, right? I mean, if you think about all the data and analytics and AI, that's all being kind of flushed under the FP&A area. And again, not to say accounting is super important. And if you don't do that right, you're never going to have a strong FP&A function. But FP&A is recognized right now as really important to the growth engines of any company. And it's an exciting area to be in for sure.
And I had planned on titling this episode, Steve Says Accountants Are Not Important.
Well, that would be a mischaracterization completely.
So I didn't summarize that one well. All right. No.
Yeah, you get an F on that one. Yeah.
As I've often said, a good accountant is FP&A's best friend. If those books aren't right and you don't have a good understanding of them, it's really hard to take that and project forward and understand what you think is going to happen. So it's a partnership. It's like you said, it's not that one's more important than the other. They both fill different roles and they need to work together. The best FP&A team works well with their accounting. Best accounting teams work well with their FP&A. Goes both ways. Yep,
they leverage each other. And to remember one thing, the roots of accounting and FP&A are really in the financial statements.
Yes.
So as much as we want to kind of separate these, the roots all come from the same place. And so from that perspective, there's that commonality that really binds accounting and FP&A, and that's a good understanding of the financial statements.
Yeah, the CFO manages finance and accounting, right? And accounting and finance are all part of those financial statements at the end of the day.
And we add treasury to that too, by the way. But yes, accounting.
Yeah, I'll agree. Treasury is important as well. There's no question, especially if you're going to be a CFO. Like that's one thing I haven't really dealt with. I dealt a little bit with treasury at American Express. I supported Traveler's Check. And so we had a $2 billion liability on the balance sheet for all those on and cash checks that we invested. So I had to work with treasury to understand that and meet with them monthly around, hey, what's the rates we're earning, trying to project what would get called potentially, how much cash we needed to have in that portfolio. So that was my experience with treasury, but more the traditional, raising funds, those type of things that you often think about it as a CFO. I never got involved in, but I definitely did get involved in some of it, supporting a prepaid business because of all that money you get up front.
Planning Excel works great until it doesn't. When you need to scale across products, customers, or complex scenarios, and the manual, error-prone, back-and-forth spreadsheet planning becomes insurmountable, consider Kepion. Recognized by Gartner's Magic Quadrant for financial planning software, Kepion brings the flexibility you love in spreadsheets to a streamlined, scalable platform that grows with you. Trusted by global orgs across industries, including manufacturing, CPG, and nonprofit, and more, with Kepion, you can plan your way. From high-level forecasts to granular detail. It's more than just software, it's planning on your terms, freeing you for analysis and insights to move your business forward. Discover what you can achieve with Kepion. Visit Kepion.com. That's KEPION.com.
Well, and really important for FP&A, the cash flow forecasting is related directly to Treasury, right? So Treasury has to either raise funds if we're not giving the right terms to customers or vendors aren't giving us the right terms. All of a sudden, Treasury is the one who gets the burden because they got to go raise the funds. So FP&A has a direct link to Treasury just in the cash side for sure.
I mean, the example like that with the bonds, at one point, if it dropped below a certain amount, we would have had to put money in or liquidate, move it elsewhere. They changed some of the rules within how the company was incorporated to allow us to keep it the way it was. And that was Treasury that managed that with legal and tax and all those people. But it had a big impact on our business because if they hadn't done it, there would have been a big hit as we continued to wind down. You know, when I support Traveler's Check 8 years ago now, 10 years ago, it was definitely not a growing product, as you could imagine.
Right.
Half the people listening to this will probably be like, what's a Traveler's Check? What is that?
What's a Traveler's Check? Well, what you just described, though, is the teamwork that the CFO suite, FP&A, accounting, touches so many parts of the business. That's why it's just such a great education, whether it's FP&A or accounting. You get exposed to every part of the business, unlike any other department in a company normally. You're touching every part of the business. And that starts with the accounting group and goes right to the FP&A group when it comes to budgeting, planning, forecasting, and doing investment analysis. You really get to know the other. In fact, a lot of at Cargill, the strategic planning group was really kind of an outcropping of the finance team and the CFO.
I mean, you hear the term a lot now. I see people, they're over financial planning and strategy, or you see the term strategic finance. Originally, a lot of that was by the vendors to make it sound, better for selling, but you're seeing more and more of that in titles and roles and finances being asked to be more strategic. And so I have one more question on this front, and then we'll jump into some things about CFO University and talking about being a CFO, because a lot of people who listen to this podcast have aspirations, right? They want to be a CFO. They're working in FP&A and they figure out, how do I get to the top? So the question I have around FP&A kind of relates a little bit to the CFO. I had Jack McCullough on the show. I know you know him, CFO Leadership Council. He predicted that going forward, within the next couple of years, the majority of CFOs would come out of FP&A versus controllership. What's your thoughts on that?
I won't disagree with Jack on that, but I would say part of the reason is accounting. There's going to be more FP&A people than accounting people. It's going to happen that way. And so part of it's just a lot of accounting people are going to move into FP&A, partly because of a shortage of jobs. What accounting is, you're going to have your CPAs and your chartered accountants, all the attestation piece. That's going to stay there. But those people are learning skills that aren't necessarily key to becoming a CFO anymore, right? I mean, those skills, they're very important. They're going to help you get funding. They're going to help your investors understand the business. They're going to be important, but they're not going to create as many CFOs as they have in the past. In fact, that's changed quite a bit already. So the CPA and chartered accountant world, I think that number is going down from 44% 10 years ago to 34% in today's market in the public companies. So you're seeing less CPAs, but there's still going to be a lot of CPAs. So the training at FP&A, the training that you get, the strategic part of FP&A is perfect for a CFO. So I think there's skills that there's a supply issue. You're going to have more supply from FP&A, but there's also a capability issue that I think you're getting there was more capabilities that the CFOs will need in the future that are going to come out of FP&A.
Makes sense. I would agree with both those. We're definitely seeing.
We got to find something to disagree with here, Paul, because we're agreeing on everything. So you got to ask me a question that we can just fight about.
Let's see. I disagree with wearing coats. Vests are much better.
Okay, well, and I've got all this old inventory sitting in my closet, and the second somebody says you got to get a vest for something, I got to go to the store and buy it. So I can just pull this out of my closet. I don't have to go to the store. So it's an efficiency thing for me.
Spoken like a true finance person. I can't even argue with that one. Dang it.
You can't.
You ran the math and you figured it was cheaper to just throw on the inventory that you had than go buy new stuff.
Just go to my closet and throw something on, and then Well, and if I could grow a beard like yours, I would. So that's another place we agree. But I can't grow a beard like that. So I'm kind of stuck with what I got.
Well, there's really only two things to growing a beard: genetics and time. One of them, you either have it or you don't. And the other one, you just have to be patient.
I definitely have the time, but I don't have the genetics, I guess.
I won't comment on the time. I'm grateful we have a few young people on the show. I'm going to get myself in trouble. All right, back to the regularly scheduled program here. So you run CFO University. Tell us about that.
Well, CFO University, and I use the dot because that happens to be our URL, so we use that in our branding. But CFO University, it's a place to develop CFOs and anybody who reports to a CFO towards a CFO position. So normally, a CFO has been in their job more than 5 years, doesn't believe we can help them. I might disagree with that, but so it's usually what you might call inexperienced, 5-year and less CFOs, and anybody who reports to the CFO. That's kind of our target market, and we are a practical, convenient, and performance enhancing platform for people to use. And how we look at that is we're not trying to be an MBA school, trying to, teach MBAs, the Black-Scholes pricing model or whatever it's going to be. We're trying to give practical advice on how to be a CFO. And that means how to run the departments of a CFO, which again, we talk about that being accounting, finance, treasury, and then a leadership quality. So that's what we teach in practical terms. And how we do that is we do that through courses. We do a lot of thought leadership. That's all free and in our website, a lot of that. But then we also have courses people can take under our 4 pillars. And we have tools that shine a bright light, on kind of really important aspects of the CFO role. And those tools are normally short, easy to implement, and they're really meant to get information that you can deliver to your board, your executive team, your team, to kind of show how you could position an issue that might be really important to your business in a really easy light. So it tries to take that complexity of some of our roles or some of what our jobs that we do and try to make it bite-sized, ready for a board or an executive team or your CEO. And then we have coaching. So we do some coaching. I do some coaching with Andy Burrows out of the Supercharged Finance Group out of the UK. Got to know Andy over the years, and so we do some coaching as well.
What does the coaching mostly consist of? Is that helping with soft skills, time management? What do people usually come to you for help with on the coaching side?
Well, what we do is we kind of do an assessment. So we have a CFO readiness assessment that assesses more the experiential part of somebody's career. And we can identify with the 4 pillars where they've had experience. So we'll use that. We'll also use an assessment on their team and their operations. And that usually involves more than just the CFO. They'll use the executive team too. And so we'll marry their competencies individually, their professional competencies, with what the business needs. And then we'll create a professional development program for them. And then how the mechanics work is we'll go through that, discuss that with them, and then we have a monthly check-in meeting where we help them kind of manage their progress, see what they're doing. And, if it's somebody, we recognize pretty quickly, is it the soft skills they need? Does their business require some technical skills they don't have? And we had talked about this earlier, I think, Paul, but one of the technical part of the job really depends on the company you're with. You don't have to have much finance at all if you're a public company CFO who's got a chief accounting officer. You'll have all these other resources. A lot of the public company CFOs aren't necessarily financially trained. But if you're in a small or medium-sized company, you will need, you better be a top financial expert because you're the one who's driving all that. So kind of depends what you need there. And we cater to the small and medium-sized enterprises. There's not a lot of public companies who are coming to CFO University. I shouldn't say yet, because I think we can train all en masse, all the executives below the CFO in any public company. But we really, that isn't our target market.
So you're saying when I plan on becoming CFO of Apple, you probably wouldn't be the target for me?
Well, I wouldn't be your coach. Well, yeah, of course I could be your coach, but our platform could help you train all your team. That's I think a market that we're trying to dabble in and find our footing there. Haven't been very successful yet, but it isn't going to be you as the CFO of Apple who's going to spend a bunch of time with me. it would be your team that spends a bunch of time with CFO University.
Got it. Helping kind of upskill that team to prepare them for more senior roles and that type of thing.
Yeah.
All right. So as we've talked about a little bit earlier, many people on the show want to be CFOs. What advice would you offer them? Where should they get started if they're thinking, hey, at some point I want to be a CFO, but they're like, I'm not sure how to get there. They're working in FP&A today. Maybe they've been in their career 3 to 5 years, maybe, analyst, senior analyst, maybe their first manager role, somewhere in that area. What advice would you offer to them?
Well, let's assume they have the technical skills for the most part. And by that, they understand a balance sheet and a P&L. They know how they work. They know the big metrics. They can look at a balance sheet, the financial statements, and make some quick assessments and ask some really smart questions. So I'm going to assume that that's a start. And so a general background that, that they understand enough of the big picture items that they know how the moving parts work. Then I would say it gets into more, being bold and being willing to share your insights. So now it becomes, okay, I've been in my financial analyst role. I've kind of, the information's kind of bubbled to the top. I'm going to be more, and I don't want to say dramatic, but I want to be a bigger presence. So how do I do that? So talking to your boss about how do I give the presentation rather than you give the presentation? How do I have more influence within our teams? I think I have a lot of ideas. So being able to share those ideas, not just do what you're told, but do what you think should be done. Right. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think in that, if that sounds like, hey, go be a big mouth and just blab away, I caution you that, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for one reason. And you learn a lot more when you listen than when you talk. So you got to kind of couple that, really be strategic in how you're absorbing information from your company, who you're meeting with. And so I think that's really important that you strategically get around the right people. And that isn't just the networking people. It's more, who can you learn from and who's willing to teach you. And that's really important. So one of the real soft skills. And then, kind of thinking about strategically, when I have a business interaction, there's 2 outcomes. One is I want to make the business better. And the other is, how do I make my career better? So if you kind of position, all your business interactions with that second question, what can I do? Do I have to deliver more? Can I be better prepared? How can this person help me? How can I help them so they want to help me? All those strategic things that, we kind of give an answer to a question. A spreadsheet gives us an answer, and we kind of deliver that to somebody and throw it on their desk. That all has to change. It has to be, how do I nurture these relationships with giving great information? And how do I solve a business problem? And how do I improve my career?
Thank you. Great advice. I really like, one, how do you solve a business problem? How does that help you improve your career? Learning to listen and also ask questions. I had a boss say, he started to move up when he started to ask smart questions during meetings. They could tell he was listening and thinking, and he had done preparation, not, hey, this number doesn't tie, or you used the wrong font there. Sometimes finance can have that, pointing out every little technical thing that's wrong. That's not what we mean by bringing up more things in a meeting. That's not going to help you advance. But I've seen that where sometimes people think, but I'm commenting. Yeah, but you're not helping your cause.
Yeah, that's the, kind of having self-awareness and understanding how you're being perceived becomes really important. And frankly, that's an easy thing to not be, especially finance people who have continually getting praised for your good work. So that's a great report. Thank you for that, for that kind of stuff. And not thinking, okay, how do I deliver this in a way that's going to, people are going to want to absorb it. They're going to want to do more. They're going to ask me more questions. And I think that's that self-awareness piece is where, the person asking that question, hey, the font is the wrong size on that slide. Can you change it for me? That they are not very self-aware. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I think self-awareness, there's something else you mentioned in there, is that ability to take things to the next level. You can be great at your job in the sense I deliver all my reports on time, my forecasts are generally accurate, my models are well built, but you're not actually providing recommendations or being proactive, help the business move forward, which I think it goes with that self-aware. Like you said, when you start to combine those together, that's when you really will start to see opportunities open up because you're making others' lives easy, not just doing your job requirements really well. Job requirements are the table stakes. That's what we expect. It's how do you take that and make more out of it in the sense of adding value to the business.
Yep, and great points. Great points. Taking that extra effort to think about that and manage it. Don't just let it happen, but think about how can I make this better.
And I wish I would have spent more time during my career, a lot of time just kind of doing the job versus thinking about how do I manage this and make things better, because it makes a difference. We're going to move into the FP&A section here. I have a couple different FP&A questions I'm going to ask you. And we're going to start with, what does great FP&A look like? What is great FP&A in your mind, Steve?
I think one thing is impartial and data-driven. So you want your FP&A not to be sponsored by a sales department or the operations people. So I think we want to look to the FP&A. You're going to get great data analysis, and that they're data-driven. So it isn't somebody's opinion. It isn't, and so I think FP&A is kind of based on that independence of thought using data. So that's a kind of a really important concept, I think, for people to understand. I think FP&A teams, and that means all the people in the team, need to be intellectually curious. So I think you want to understand the next level. You have this craving to know more, and normally it should be about the business, craving to know more. How can we make this better? But this intellectual curiosity that says, what would happen if we did this? Nobody's ever thought of that before. How can we? And I think that's a great kind of, it is maybe innate. I don't know if you can build that, but you want people that will have that burning desire to be that way. And then I think, dynamic and strategic insight. So you want to be able to be flexible. So you want to be able to cater to people's needs and adjust your thinking, because I think that if anywhere, people need to evaluate options. So they need to come up with options. So I think they have to be very open to dynamic changing of a business and strategic. So thinking on a high level. And then I think, being able to give actionable, insightful, important insights, that are, so being able to raise above to say, here's what's important. The paper clips aren't that big a deal. If you buy 10,000 more, it's not going to kill us. But boy, if we don't sell product C, more of that, we can see products D, E, and F are going to decline. So, that insights that say the dependencies in the business, and it all comes down to, capital allocation. How do they understand how we best allocate capital? And how and that's really when it comes down to it. FP&A is all about how companies should be reallocating capital and deploying capital. And so thinking at that level strategically is important. And then, so I guess I would say.
FP&A Guy here. Today, I want to talk about the FP&A Guy's Ultimate FP&A Course Bundle. This bundle includes over 10 hours of content recorded by Ron Montero and myself, many templates, and great lessons to make you a better FP&A professional. The content includes FP&A business partnering, how to manage tough conversations, build world-class relationships, and hold the business accountable. It includes modern Excel, which is a real game changer for the way you'll work in Excel. Excel tables, the gateway to modern Excel. Power Query, a game changer for transforming your manual processes and loading data. And then dynamic arrays. Next, we cover modeling design principles. In this course, we talk about the importance of designing models in a certain way and how important it is that you think about design. And last but not least, driving value through smart analysis. How you can conduct data analysis to be a better FP&A professional. Go ahead and sign up for this bundle at thefpnaguy.com. That's thefpnaguy.com. Use the code podcast to save 25%. Get started learning today. As you said that, especially the capital allocation, I couldn't help but think of Warren Buffett. Could you see him in an FP&A department?
He would have made a great FP&A guy, wouldn't he? He'd have been.
Yeah, I mean, because he said once, that's kind of what he was born to do type of thing, is allocate capital, right? That's what he's doing it as an investor. In FP&A, we're helping ensure how we're allocating capital is smart. It's really what it comes down to. When you boil it all down is, are we doing a good job of allocating capital? And you'll know by the returns in your P&L. You're constantly losing money or your numbers are getting worse and worse. then you're not doing a good job of allocating capital. Now, there may be external factors for that. And that's your job to help the business understand that and determine if you need to go in a different direction. But at the end of the day, it will be pretty obvious in your financials if you're doing a bad job.
Well, and FP&A it is the most important role, but it's not something we necessarily task them with the first. But when you think about it, we've allocated capital. How is that doing? And where would we reallocate? Where should we reallocate capital? That's a really tough question because you have to kind of see that third dimension. And so I think challenging FP&A people to think about if we didn't have this product, where would the capital to make that product go? Or if we weren't in this geography, where would the capital to run that geography go? And that's a kind of a third tier question. But that's where a really thoughtful, curious FP&A team is thinking about. You guys say we sell a lot of this product, but is it really? Are we really getting a return on the capital? And I think that's kind of an exciting area for FP&A and where a lot of data and analytics can help us. And we're really moving much closer to that than we were, 15 or 20 years ago.
Got it. Thanks for that. All right. Next one. What's the number one technical skill FP&A professionals should master?
The number one technical skill. I talked about our roots, accounting and finance. And so I still think you need to understand financial statements and kind of how businesses make money, which is how, so understanding, how a financial state, how they interact and what they mean is super important. Now, you stick that into Chat GPT and it's going to tell you Excel modeling skills, right? I mean, and I'm sure, but I think it's more fundamental than that. It's understanding.
We're going to try that right now live. Keep going.
Okay, you do that right now and see what happens. But I think the fundamental understanding of finance, being able to communicate. I mean, financial statements are what we use, the language of business. I mean, it is the language of business as much as they seem like they're a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper that people want to disparage. They're still how we communicate in business, right?
Are you ready for the answer from Chat GPT?
I'm ready for the answer.
It disagreed with you, so we have another area of disagreement.
Okay, good.
The number one technical skill for FP&A professionals to master is not accounting; it's advanced Excel proficiency.
So advanced versus just Excel. So okay, we can argue about that if you want. But I think and you're deep into it. I saw your modeling skills when we did a job with Prashant, and I saw your high level, and those are very valuable. But I think what came first was the understanding of accounting and financial statements. In fact, I know it. I'm sure I would bet my life on it.
You have to have a fundamental understanding of finance.
Yeah. And so, and frankly, okay, so here's what I did this morning. Preparation. I stuck in fake financial statements, just, sales into ChatGPT and said, make me a forecast. Okay. It does some averages, makes a just like you would do in Excel. I'm going to use an average. I'm not giving it any other information. And then I said, well, now tell me. So this is the fun part. Now tell me what happens, what should I focus on? What area of the P&L should I focus on to improve my business the most? And it made up an answer. And it was an okay answer, but that answer is going to get better and better and better. So your ability to use Excel, I think that's great right now. I think we still really need it, but eventually it's going to be asking questions. It's going to be asking the right question, not being able to use dynamic arrays and all those big fancy things you do. Right? I mean, it's not going to be that. Something else is going to do that for you, but being able to ask the right question is going to be what's important.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of being able to get something else to help you think about it. I mean, I can use ChatGPT to write formulas for me now. I can use Copilot. They can help enhance my Excel skills. You need that understanding still to be able to validate things. And so I think when you have the knowledge, you're more deadly with ChatGPT. But there are definitely areas where it's going to change. And over time, ChatGPT, I think, will do two things. It'll make us more strategic and more big picture human, the soft skills. It's also going to make us a little more technical, but in a different way. A basic understanding of coding like Python and data science will allow you to do things that you could never do before without years of that.
Yeah.
And so you'll see more of that needed than how to write a VLOOKUP.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I see happening, is a little bit more technical, but in a different way and not the same depth.
Yeah.
And more strategic.
And we're still building on the same platform, right? You're still building on the same roots. So I think that's a great point. And what I don't know, we haven't talked much about generative processing yet, but if I think about it, how I see that happening is using it as a reference tool. So when I use it, and I don't want to jump on a question you're going to ask, but ChatGPT, for example, is something I use. I'll try to get my own answers first. Here's what I expect to see, and then let me see what that says and compare the two. And it almost always gives me new ideas. Very rarely better ideas, by the way, but very more ideas that I can leverage. And so I think that's the tools that we have available to us in AI are going to certainly do those things you mentioned and just help us get better. But you can't let it think for you, right? I mean, it's not going to think for you. You're going to have a stable of really a good background to begin with, and even some hypothesis yourself, I think. Otherwise, you're going to kind of blindly travel into areas that you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So let's go ahead and go to that question for a second. You shared a little bit of how you're using generative AI. So a two-part question. What are you mostly using it for? And do you have a tool you prefer? Is there one you mostly use, or are you trying all of them?
I don't think I'm as far along as you are on this. So I still a ChatGPT. I used Claude for a little bit and kind of got out of that. But how I use it is to check something. And to maybe an example would be we're forming an advisory board. So I put out, here's the skills I think we need. Here's the dynamics. Here's what I think I want out of this advisory board. And here's how I want to put it together. Here's the skill sets we need for a company like ours. And I put that together. And then I ran it through ChatGPT. And I got a really pretty good, a lot of interesting ideas and thoughts like, oh, I missed this and this. And so that's where it augments. It augments kind of my initial thoughts. And frankly, for the millions of people it's checking at, who am I to think that it's not better than me in some of that? So I think we got to be realistic that some of these areas, if we're not the technical experts or the deep expert in a certain area, ChatGPT is going to go to a lot of areas that have that expertise. So I think that's where if you're not the subject matter expert in the world on a specific area, using it to help you is a real bonus.
Yeah, I think it's a great point there. I agree. All right, so now back to the next question for FP&A professionals to master. What's the number one soft skill?
In the general realm of communication, I would say being able to connect with people. And so, call that part of the influence, but, understanding how people are perceiving your message and being able to change that if people aren't receiving your message. And so how often do you hear somebody complain, I told them that and they didn't do it. I told them to do that and it didn't. And why didn't they do it? Well, look in the mirror and say they didn't do it because they didn't believe you or they didn't take you seriously. So if you ever hear anybody saying, I told them and they didn't do it, then look in the mirror because you didn't tell them right. You didn't use the right language. You didn't have the right support, whatever. But so I would say that piece of connecting with your audience so they know, so they can understand you better is really important. And that, again, comes back to self-awareness. So how do you become self-aware and connect with the audience? So that's how you get people to listen to you. When you connect with them, they listen to you. If you're not connected with them, they kind of, toss you aside.
And I asked ChatGPT this question as well. Figured it gave two responses and told me to let them know which one I prefer. We won't read through all of them. They're a little long. But both of them said the number one soft skill is effective communication.
Yeah.
And then they went on to talk about data storytelling, translate complex, ideas, data-driven recommendations to non-finance stakeholders, that were a bridge between finance and the broader business. So I think a lot of things you took a different approach, but I think there's definitely some similarities between them.
Well, ChatGPT looks at me as an expert in that.
It does. They probably went to CFO University and
just said, here's what Steve said.
Scraped all your stuff for their training. It's amazing how much material they have. All right, we're going to move into the get to know you section. So this is where I get to ask some questions about you. You're a little nervous, I know, but you'll do okay. I think you can pass. Favorite hobby or passion? What do you do in your spare time?
When we're not chasing grandkids.
I knew grandkids were going to come up.
Yeah, when we're not chasing grandkids, I'm a pretty big cyclist. I love getting on the bike and tooling around mostly Clark County, which is where I live in Vancouver. And that's kind of my healthy habit and my way to get away from work and the solitude, that I get. So that would be my biggest hobby.
Love that one. All right. What is the one book you'd recommend to our audience? If you could recommend any book, what are you going to tell us to read?
I don't know how well this book is known, but it's called The Design of Business by Roger Martin. And a friend here, Ulrich Enders, who's an innovation specialist, had me read it a few years ago. And the whole message to me stood out. And I like to think of myself as innovative, creative, curious, and all this. And what he talks about is going from, the heuristic to from the mysterious to the heuristic to the algorithmic. So all these things, you look at the data analysis and all this and trying to get a place, improve things so that it kind of happens automatically. And you think about that from a business standpoint, you say, well, that's really smart. How do we take that, mysterious, something we don't know, to the heuristic, to something that we've practiced and now we can do it ourselves, to the algorithmic that now we just plug it in and it works. And salespeople hate this when we talk about it, because salespeople, one of their biggest strengths is their heuristic knowledge, right? They know it, nobody else does. They have their customer Rolodex and nobody else does. So they don't necessarily like that. But if you could figure out how to do a sale without having a salesperson, and I love salespeople, so I got to be careful. But that would be the algorithm that you'd want to use. And so I look at that innovation. And so I've always taken that book every couple of years. I read it again and highlight it. And I just take a lot out of it from an innovation standpoint and creative standpoint. So that's one book that people may have not known that I'd recommend.
See, that's why I talk about software tools, so nobody can know as much as me. All about containing that in.
That's right. That's where you create your value, right?
All right. Favorite travel destination? If you can go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where are you going?
Okay. And I'm going to Dallas, Texas.
Why Dallas?
Dallas, because that's where our son took our two grandkids and his wife a few years ago. So
I figured there were grandkids involved. I knew.
Actually, and our oldest daughter and our youngest daughter, we have 3 kids, all live close by here. So Dallas would be one place. Now, if you said, but if you couldn't go to Dallas, where would you go? I think I'd book a ticket to Bermuda or to Geneva, Switzerland, for personal reasons on Geneva, and then Bermuda, just a beautiful place.
All right, I like it. So we got Bermuda, Geneva, and Dallas. If you can figure out what those 3 have in common, let me know. I got a prize for you.
Oh, but I don't have to do it right now. I can do it later, because I'll definitely give you an answer.
Sure, and I already know what the prize is. I'll tell you offline, though. I don't want to, get anyone too excited.
Okay.
All right. If you could have dinner with one person in the world that's alive, who are you taking to dinner?
That's alive?
Yep. Got to go alive. I should have added that to the question, but
okay.
I'd like to add a little
nuance.
Well,
a couple things. So let's think about, okay. So I'm going to stay away from politics just because I think that I'm sick of politics with the election so close.
Yeah, we're right before the election. So anyone in the U.S. is probably like you. They're sick of it. Can we just get it over with?
Right. So Tom Hanks, because I just love his movies. So I think I would love him. But
Run, Forrest, Run. Got it.
I hope I wouldn't be disappointed. But Tom Hanks would be one. And I think Stephen Covey. Love his teaching. He
taught at my alma mater before he started his own business. He taught at BYU.
Did you ever have a class from him?
I didn't. We had a class where we did his 7 Habits book and discussed it. He had left before a couple years before I got there.
Well, the 7 Habits, so I worked on a job 20 miles away, and I would leave on Monday mornings, come back Thursday or Friday nights. And I got the tapes from the 7, and I must have listened to that book 7 or 8 times through my trips to Pendleton, Oregon. And I just really got to really like the way what he taught and what he preached. The other thing I would do, people, so, you asked about who's alive. The people who are dead, I think it would be all the big religious leaders, whether that's Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, maybe even throw in a few philosophers, Socrates or something in there. But I think that would be pretty interesting.
Could you imagine sitting down at dinner with the great religious leaders over all time, like Martin Luther, the Protestant Revolution, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, whoever it might be, of all the different religions out there.
That would be really cool.
And really just spend a couple hours understanding them. That would be amazing. I'll be the fly on the wall for that one.
Okay, well, I'll invite you when I go.
Okay, when you make that happen, let me know.
I'll let you know.
Another great book, and then we'll wrap up here. I don't know if you've read it, by Stephen R. Covey, is Principle-Centered Leadership. Really good one. He makes that whole argument that, look, great leaders have principles they don't violate, that they always follow. It starts on a base with being principally centered, right? Those are those core values, so you don't get yourself in trouble. It doesn't mean you can't be situational and you treat everybody different. You need that awareness, but you need that core to keep you grounded.
Well, I'll pick up that book for sure because I love his writing. His son, do you ever read The Speed of Trust?
I know the concepts. I haven't read the whole book.
Good, it's a pretty good book too.
Teach a little bit of the concepts in a couple of our courses that he has.
Yeah, it's a worthwhile read as well.
Yeah, it's definitely one I need to. All right, well, we're on wrap up time here. We've had a great conversation, almost hour long here. So the last question is, any other advice you offer to anyone listening who wants to be a CFO one day? You could give them one more piece of advice or just kind of a wrap up. What would you tell them?
I'd say be curious, be bold, be heard, and be learning. And that means listen.
Be bold, be curious, be heard, or be listening. And what was the fourth one?
Be learning.
Be learning. Got it. Be heard, be learning, be curious, be bold. Love it. All right. If someone wants to learn more about you or get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with them. So it's just Steve Rosvold, Rosvold, and they can get to me pretty easy on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way.
Yeah, that usually is. It's quite easy these days. And we'll definitely put your profile in the show notes. So thanks for joining us, Steve. I enjoyed chatting, and you have a great day.
What a pleasure, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to FP&A Tomorrow. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review on your podcast platform of choice. This allows us to continue to bring you great guests from around the globe. As a reminder, you can earn CPE credit by going to earmarkcpe.com, downloading the app, taking a short quiz, and getting your CPE certificate. To earn continuing education credits for the FPAC certification, take the quiz on Earmark and contact me, the show host, for further details.